anyways, so if you're orderly, you don't leave your belongings around, obviously. You like order, well there's a surprise. You keep things tidy, you follow a schedule, so you order your time. That's definitely a good predictor of productivity. You're bothered by messy people. And bothered is an interesting word, right? Because if you're orderly and you're somewhere messy and it bothers you, you might think, well, exactly what it is that you're experiencing when you're bothered. You know, I know if I go to a place that's in real disarray, it looks like people have been failing to live up to their responsibilities. Say it's a visceral sensation. I really don't like it. I'm very strongly compelled to put things in order. You know, and but it's obviously a negative emotion, but it's not the kind of negative emotion that seems to load on neuroticism. So it doesn't seem to be fear or anxiety or emotional pain or frustration or disappointment or any of those things. So then you might ask, well, you know, what's left? Bothered. Wants everything to be just right. Dislikes routine. Opposite, obviously. Orderly people like routine. They see that rules are observed and they want every detail taken care of. Well, you can see that in some ways orderliness is the soul of bureaucracy, right? Because everything in its place and a place for everything is basically the sort of hallmark of an orderly person. Well, in my clinical practice, I've certainly observed that people who are really disorderly and really high in neuroticism, they just never improve. You know, because their fear and their anxiety sort of paralyze them into immobility, and the fact that they're low in conscientiousness or low in orderliness means they will never do anything, and then disorder grows around them, and that exacerbates their anxiety and their fear. It's like it's a real catastrophe. So, and then so that's where the conservatives are different. They're more orderly than liberals are. Industriousness, liberals and conservatives seem to be about the same. So industrious person carries out their plans, they don't waste time, they don't find it difficult to get down to work, they don't mess things up, they finish what they start, they put their mind on the task at hand, they get things done quickly, so there's an efficiency element to it. They don't postpone decisions and they aren't easily distracted. And so industrious people tend not to procrastinate, and procrastination actually seems to be something like low industriousness and high neuroticism. So, you know, it's a very pernicious phenomena, and procrastination can really drive people stark raving mad.
Is the bullet point waste time supposed to be reversed, or is that a component of industrious?
No, it's reversed.
Okay.
Yeah. So the ones that don't make sense are reversed. So now, it isn't exactly obvious why orderliness and industriousness are related so tightly, or why they're somewhat differentiable, but it turns out that that is the case statistically. Now, I've thought a lot about why orderliness and industriousness really is a mystery. We've started to associate orderliness with sensitivity to disgust, and I'm going to elaborate on that quite a bit. Industriousness, we haven't been able to get a handle on at all. And so conscientiousness is somewhat of a mystery, eh? Because up till maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, even though it was a really good predictor of long-term life success and happiness, we didn't have any models for it, because it just came out of the statistical analysis of the semantic structure of language, right? So it was atheoretical. So there's no theoretical model. Why are people conscientious? Well, we have no idea. There's no neuropsychological model. We have no idea what part of the brain is associated with conscientiousness. And weirdly enough, the sorts of things that are associated with conscientiousness are very close to what theorists have identified as the function of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, say, which is the part of the brain that deals with the highest order of abstractions. And the whole prefrontal cortex people have associated with the ability to plan and the ability to inhibit impulses and the ability to think in the long term. And that all sounds like conscientiousness. But if you assess people's dorsolateral prefrontal function with tests, cognitive tests, that are characterized by activation, when people are doing those tests, their prefrontal cortex is activated in, say, functional MRI, the correlation between the prefrontal ability, assessed cognitively, and conscientiousness itself is 0. So it's really weird, because this also means to me that most theories of prefrontal function are wrong. So you can think about it this way, is that in order to, the prefrontal cortex does seem to be good at manipulating abstractions. But by definition, an abstraction is something that's abstracted from the real world, right? It's no longer connected to the real world. And so when you're thinking about your future, say, you've pulled abstract representations of the world up into this space where you're doing your thinking, and it's a disembodied space. Obviously, you're not acting it out. And so you have to be able to dissociate the abstractions from the real world in order to manipulate the abstractions, which is thinking, without acting them out. But the thing about conscientious people isn't that they make plans so much. It's that if they make a plan, then they do it. And so that means that there's this ability to take the abstraction, you know, well, I promised to do X. Okay, well, that means you've been able to think up X. But the next question is, if you promise to do it, will you do it? And the answer to that could easily be no, and it is the answer generally if you're not conscientious. But that doesn't seem to be associated with prefrontal function at all. And you see these weird dissociations in a lot of clinical cases. So people with borderline personality disorder are a good example because they're very unconscientious and very high in neuroticism. And they're often very smart. And so these people, you talk to them, you know, and they're perfectly capable of identifying what their problems are and even telling you what the causal pathway is and even telling you about what they should do in the future, but they absolutely will not do it. So the ability to think and the willingness to put those thoughts into operation seem to be completely separable phenomena. And we don't know much about the system that motivates people to put their plans into action or to keep a promise or to not procrastinate. We don't know what that's associated with. So